Good day and welcome to another of Brother Bailey's very entertaining videos. Today we're going to focus on sight and understanding the eye. Like the previous senses, our primary job is to understand how to convert some sort of environmental stimulus into a language that the brain can understand, which is an action potential, and sight is no different. The challenge comes from the fact that we don't really understand what light is. I mean, Albert Einstein won a Nobel Prize for telling us that we don't know what light is. Sometimes it acts like a wave, sometimes it acts like a particle, but it has no mass, so it's just this quantized ball of energy. And trying to understand actually how to convert that into an action potential is challenging. To start, what we're going to do, we're going to first focus on the surface anatomy of the eye. Once we understand the anatomy, then we can begin to understand how the eye is collecting the light and converting it into an action potential. All right, starting here, the most outer part of the layer, this is called the sclera. Beneath the sclera, we have this dark layer. Let's see if we can find it. Just deep to the sclera, we have the choroid. In this picture, we show the choroid being black, and that's going to be very important. And then deep to the choroid, we have the retina. Now, going back to the choroid, if we follow the choroid to the anterior part of the eye, we can see that the choroid is actually continuous with the iris. We can label that. And from our unit on the autonomic nervous system, you'd recognize that in the iris we've got both the radial and circular muscles that help the pupil dilate or constrict. Of course, this opening here is going to be the pupil. The sclera is also continuous with another set of smooth muscle structures. We can put that here and here. This is called the ciliary body. And it houses the suspensory ligaments. The suspensory ligaments are what hold the lens, we'll label that hold the lens in place. And the ciliary body, the muscles within the ciliary body, are responsible for either tightening the suspensory ligaments or loosening the suspensory ligaments. If the ciliary body is relaxed, this results in tight ligaments, and that accommodates looking in the distance. However, if the ciliary body is flexed, this leads to loose ligaments, and that accommodates for close-up vision. This is often why if you're reading a book for a long time and you're focusing on something up close, your eyes tend to wear out, right? It hurts after a little while because you're flexing the muscles in that ciliary body that are loosening the ligaments and allowing the lens to adopt a more round shape, which accommodates for up-close vision. So that's how we adjust there. I want to go back to the retina for just a minute. The retina is where the photoreceptors contains photoreceptors, and we'll talk more in depth about these in our next video. But this is the area that contains photoreceptors. I do want you to consider briefly, if we were to zoom in on that region right there, what would we see? Well, we would see that the most inner layer, which is the retina, we've labeled that. But let's look and see what this actually is. The retina is going to contain the ganglion cell. We'll go into detail in a minute. So here's the ganglion cell, and then it's going to turn and it's going to synapse on a bipolar cell. And the bipolar cell is in turn going to synapse on my photoreceptor cell, which is going to either be a rod or a cone. Rods for night vision, for black and white, and cones are for color vision. And then behind that, we have this layer of choroid. And then behind that, we've got the sclera. Now, as we look at that, we have a bit of a problem, because light is coming from this direction. And this area right here, my photoreceptor cell, this is the area that's sensitive to light. And so in order for light to get there, it's got to pass through the ganglion cells. It's got to pass through all the bipolar cells, and then it's going to hit against that photoreceptor cell. This is not ideal in terms of getting really nice pristine vision, but there is a purpose for it. As we'll talk about in a second, there's some recycling of retinol that needs to take place in order to maintain sensitivity to light, and the choroid is responsible for doing that. So there's a little bit of recycling that happens right here, and that's why this system is set up the way it is. That said, we do have something that allows us to get past this thick membrane that the light has to travel through. If we come back over here and we look at our eye, right here, this little indentation, this structure is called the fovea. Now, of course, it's part of the greater region that we call the macula. And the macula is where we've got a really high concentration of cones. In this region, there's going to be 6 to 7 million cone photoreceptor cells. But if you look at how that fovea is shaped, I just want you to appreciate that the cells kind of part to allow greater access of light directly onto the fovea. And this is where I'm going to find the most acute, most sensitive, most high resolution images, is when I'm looking right at something. It's not in my side vision, it's when I'm focusing right on something. And so that's kind of important. We do see, let's see, a couple other things that we can label. As the ganglion cells of the retina come in, they will exit here, and all of those form the optic nerve. And because that location doesn't have any photoreceptor cells, this location I'm talking about right here, that location is called the blind spot. And that, for the most part, is the anatomy that we want to focus on. I do want to just help you understand the role that these anatomical structures play in focusing light, and then talk a little bit about myopia, hyperopia, and how changes to primarily the cornea can lead to near farsightedness. So as we think about light coming in, the job of the cornea, and then to some extent the lens, is to focus that light directly onto the fovea, right onto the retina where I wanted it. If that focal point is too far in front or too far behind the retina, then interesting things will happen. So let's come over here and look at this scenario where the eye is a little bit long, and we see the same kind of thing where the light's going to come in and ends up focusing before the retina. This is what we call myopia, or being nearsighted. And it happens with the focus of light being in front. Now, what you'll see, that means that all of this region back here is receiving a diluted input of light. So instead of just a few pixels showing up crisply, you're having a wide range of these photoreceptor cells that are acting as individual pixels, picking up a lot of diluted light. And that's what causes the image to be blurry. Now, how do I go about fixing this? Well, let's come over here and let's add to this a concave lens. The concave lens focuses light to bounce outward. And so as the light expands outward, then reaching the further edges of the corneal lens, we get that shift back inward, and it puts the focus back where it should be. So let's add the other in there. Not the best drawing, but you get the idea. The opposite is true if we look now at hyperopia, where we've got light coming in. This is hyperopia because the focal point is behind the eye, or behind the retina. And so this is being farsighted. And we solve it by doing just the opposite. Here we have a convex lens. Now, as light comes in, it's bounced inward. And we get the focal point right where we want it to be. Anyway, not the best drawings, but you get the idea on how that works. And that is essentially the anatomy of the eye. There is one other one, and this is presbyopia. This is essentially age-related. Farsighted, so being around age 45 to 50. What happens here? Well, in this case, the lens itself becomes less pliable. So we talked earlier here about the ciliary body, and how if the muscles are flexed, then it looses the ligaments. And what should happen for close up is that you get a nice round lens, and that takes care of it. But with age, what happens is that stays in its elongated form, and now you just can't see close up anymore. And so you get reading glasses or something like that to help deal with the fact that the lens itself is no longer pliable and won't bend back to its original shape.